Hello world, welcome to this tutorial. My name is Steven and today we'll talk about the visitor design pattern. So let's get started. Imagine a car moving forwards, that is, until the driver enters and decides to put the car into reverse. The visitor design pattern is used to extend class functionality without altering the class too much. In this case, the driver was the visitor by adding functionality move backwards to the car class that previously only had the functionality move forwards. Let's create a UML class diagram. We have an interface called visitor with a method. The return type and the parameter type will be defined when it's implemented by a class. We also have another interface, visitable. It holds a method called accept that accepts an object of the visitor type. We then have two classes that implement their respective interfaces, the car class and the driver class. The car class has a method that, when called, calls a method from the given visitor object. In this case, that will be driver. We extend functionality from car by calling functionality from driver. Alright guys, let's start coding. First, we need to declare an interface called visitor. It holds two generic types, t and u, that we'll define later. It also has a visit method that uses something of type t and returns something of type u. On to the next one. We'll call this interface visitable. It holds generic t and it has a method that is very important. It's the accept method and it accepts a visitor object, which is basically what this entire design pattern is all about. Let's create the first class called car, and it's visitable, and it holds a private variable of type t called direction, meaning that if we decide to make t an integer, direction is going to be an integer. We're probably going to make this a string, so you'll see what I mean in a sec. Let's use the constructor to define direction. Like this. And now let's call the accept method. It holds a visitor object, and the reason why this is called the visitor design pattern is because we are going to extend the functionality of car by calling functionality of the visitor type. So let's say return visitor the visit, and as you can see, visit takes in something of type t. We also got something of type t over here, so we're going to pass in direction. There we go, nice and easy. Alright, on to the next class called driver. It implements the visitor interface because this is the visitor object, or the visitor class I guess I should say. And the first parameter is going to be a string. Why? Because t is going to be represented by a string and visit will do an integer. Alright, let's continue. We have a public integer now because we changed u into an integer. Public int called visit, and it takes in a string, something, and it's doing some random functionality here. Let's say car can now move, and then the value, and backwards. Alright, and let's return a integer. Alright, so this is our class structure. Let's continue with the objects. Let's call a visitable object that first parameter, which is going to be direction, is going to be of type string. And so we say car is new car string, and then let's say it only moves forwards on its own. Now let's declare a visitor object, visitor, that takes in a string which is going to be this forwards, and it's going to return integer. We'll call this driver, which is a new driver, like this. Almost done. Now let's check if it actually works. So let's say car.accept, let's call the accept method. Visit returns an integer, as you can see, visit returns an integer, and we call the visit method, therefore we should return an integer over here as well. So let's say accept.int, and now let's go up here. We need to pass in a visitor object. What is the visitor object? That's driver. Let's say driver.